Something happened today, something so emotionally overwhelming that, if someone had walked into the room at that exact moment, they would have never guessed the real reason behind those tears. Not because of weakness. Not because of failure. But because of a truth that had been buried for far too long. Imagine carrying words in your heart for months, maybe years, and realizing that every second of silence has become heavier than every sentence you never spoke. That is where our story begins. Today's message is not about predicting your future. It is about a powerful emotional journey that explores love, regret, hope, and the invisible connections people often feel but rarely express. So don't skip a single moment. Because the final revelation changes everything. There are moments in life when two people seem separated by distance, circumstances, misunderstandings, or fear. Yet deep inside, both are fighting battles the other cannot see. In this story, one person spent the entire day pretending everything was fine. They smiled. They answered messages. They went through routines. They completed responsibilities. But behind every ordinary moment was an extraordinary storm. No one noticed. Until the tears finally came. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just silent tears that revealed years of hidden emotions. What caused them? It wasn't one event. It was hundreds of little memories returning all at once. The first conversation. The unexpected smile. The feeling that life somehow looked brighter after meeting someone special. Then came doubt. Distance. Fear of rejection. Fear of losing everything before anything truly began. And that fear became a prison. Many people believe love ends because feelings disappear. But often, feelings remain. Only courage disappears. Think about that. How many stories have ended, not because two hearts stopped caring, but because neither one knew how to cross the distance between them? This story is about that invisible distance. As the day unfolded, every ordinary object became a reminder. A familiar song. A quiet street. A favorite place. Even the evening sky seemed to whisper forgotten memories. Each reminder unlocked another emotion. Each emotion weakened the walls built around the heart. Eventually those walls collapsed. The tears were never about sadness alone. They were about realizing how much time had been spent hiding the truth. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Perhaps you've remembered someone unexpectedly after months or years. Not because you wanted to, but because one small detail reopened an entire chapter of your life. Our minds are powerful. But memories connected to genuine emotions can be even stronger. That is why certain moments stay with us forever. In this story, today's tears became a turning point. For the first time, the characters stopped asking, "What if I get hurt?" Instead, another question appeared. What if I lose my chance forever? Those two questions sound similar. But they lead to completely different lives. Fear protects. Regret haunts. Which one would you choose? As evening approached, silence became impossible to ignore. The room felt louder than any crowd. Thoughts repeated endlessly. What if they misunderstood me? What if they already moved on? What if I waited too long? Every unanswered question became heavier than the last. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of remembering mistakes, the character remembered kindness. Small conversations. Tiny gestures. Moments that once seemed ordinary suddenly became priceless. That realization brought another wave of tears. Not because hope had disappeared. Because hope still existed. Sometimes hope hurts more than hopelessness. Because hope reminds us that another ending was always possible. Imagine standing before two doors. One leads to certainty without love. The other leads to uncertainty with possibility. Which door would you choose? Many people choose certainty. Years later, they wonder what existed behind the second door. Our story invites you to think about those choices. Life is filled with crossroads no one else can see. Some happen inside the heart. No audience. No applause. Only one decision changing everything. Tonight, the character made a quiet promise. No more pretending. No more hiding behind fear. No more allowing yesterday's pain to decide tomorrow's happiness. Whether that promise succeeds is another story. But the decision itself became the beginning of healing. Because healing does not begin when everything is perfect. It begins when honesty becomes stronger than fear. Think about the people you've met throughout life. Most disappear. Some leave lessons. A few leave permanent marks on your heart. Those rare connections shape us in ways we often understand only years later. Sometimes they teach us patience. Sometimes forgiveness. Sometimes courage. And sometimes they teach us that love without honesty cannot grow. That lesson arrived through tears. Not because tears are weakness. Because tears often reveal truths that words cannot carry. As night settled in, the character looked out the window. Nothing had changed outside. The same streets. The same sky. The same stars. Yet everything inside felt different. Perspective had shifted. The heart finally admitted what the mind had tried to deny. Some feelings cannot be buried forever. Ignoring them only delays the conversation we eventually have with ourselves. This story is not asking anyone to chase fantasies. It is asking something much simpler. If gratitude exists, express it. If forgiveness is needed, offer it. If appreciation remains unspoken, say it while the opportunity still exists. Because time moves only one direction. And opportunities rarely announce their final appearance. Imagine waking one day realizing the last chance had already passed. No warning. No countdown. Only silence. That possibility frightened the character more than rejection ever could. So those tears became something unexpected. Not an ending. A beginning. The beginning of becoming emotionally honest. The beginning of accepting uncertainty. The beginning of choosing courage over endless imagination. Every meaningful journey starts with one decision. Sometimes that decision is invisible to everyone except the person making it. No celebration. No recognition. Just quiet transformation. By midnight, peace slowly replaced the storm. Not because every answer had appeared. Because one important truth finally had. Living honestly is lighter than carrying hidden emotions forever. That truth changed everything. Maybe the greatest surprise was never the tears themselves. Maybe the greatest surprise was discovering that vulnerability can become the first step toward strength. Every person watching this story can take something different from it. Some may remember someone they once cared about. Some may realize the importance of communication. Some may simply understand that everyone carries invisible battles. Whatever message stays with you, let it remind you that every heart has a story no one else can fully see. The strongest people are not those who never cry. They are those who allow difficult emotions to teach them something meaningful instead of allowing fear to define their future. And perhaps that is the real reason today's tears mattered so much. Not because they proved love. Not because they guaranteed an ending. But because they marked the exact moment someone finally chose truth over silence. Sometimes that single decision changes an entire life. The following morning did not begin with dramatic music or miraculous signs. It began with silence. The kind of silence that feels different after someone has cried their heart out. For the first time in a very long time, there were no more excuses left to hide behind. The tears had washed away every carefully constructed lie. Not lies told to other people. The lies told to oneself. I don't care anymore. I've already moved on. It doesn't matter. Those sentences had been repeated so many times that they almost sounded believable. Almost. But the heart always remembers what the mind tries to erase. As the first rays of sunlight entered the room, something unusual happened. Instead of reaching for distractions, the character simply sat still. No music. No television. No endless scrolling. Just complete silence. And in that silence, memories began arranging themselves differently. For months, every memory had felt like a wound. Now, each memory started looking like a lesson. That change may sound small, but it transformed everything. Because when pain becomes wisdom, it loses the power to control you. Have you ever looked back at an old photograph and realized you completely misunderstood what was happening at the time? At that moment, you thought everything was falling apart. Years later, you realized life was quietly preparing you for something greater. That realization arrived today. Not with excitement. With calm. The character remembered every conversation that had once seemed ordinary. Every smile. Every laugh. Every awkward pause. Every goodbye that lasted just a second longer than expected. Back then, those moments seemed insignificant. Now they felt priceless. Sometimes we only understand the value of a moment after it becomes a memory. That truth settled deeply into the heart. Then another realization appeared. What if the greatest mistake wasn't saying the wrong thing? What if the greatest mistake was never saying the right thing at all? Those words echoed again and again. Not with guilt. With clarity. There is an enormous difference Guilt keeps people trapped in yesterday. Clarity gives people permission to change tomorrow. That morning became the first chapter of a completely different story. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" the question became, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single shift changed the emotional landscape completely. Imagine climbing a mountain. Halfway up, thick clouds surround you. You cannot see the summit. You cannot see the path ahead. All you can see is fog. Most people assume they're lost. But sometimes the summit is only a few steps away. Life often feels exactly like that. The character realized fear had been mistaken for reality. Just because something feels impossible doesn't mean it is. Just because silence exists doesn't mean feelings disappeared. Just because time passed doesn't mean every opportunity vanished. Those thoughts slowly replaced despair with determination. As the day continued, another unexpected moment arrived. A familiar song began playing somewhere nearby. Yesterday, that same song caused tears. Today, it caused a smile. Not because everything was fixed. Because the memory no longer carried only pain. It also carried gratitude. Gratitude for having experienced something meaningful. Many people spend entire lives searching for genuine connection. Even if that connection becomes complicated, it still changes who they become. The character finally understood that. Real love isn't measured only by endings. Sometimes it is measured by how deeply it transforms us. That realization brought peace. Around noon, another question surfaced. If another chance appeared, would I recognize it? That question lingered. Because opportunities rarely return wearing the same face. Sometimes they arrive disguised as coincidence. Sometimes as unexpected conversations. Sometimes as courage that wasn't there before. Missing an opportunity once doesn't mean it can never appear again. But recognizing it requires growth. Growth had finally begun. For the first time, the character wasn't waiting for someone else to create happiness. Instead, happiness slowly started growing from within. That may sound simple. Yet it is one of life's greatest turning points. When happiness depends entirely on another person, fear controls everything. When happiness grows inside you, love becomes a choice instead of a necessity. That lesson arrived quietly. No applause. No audience. Just one heart becoming stronger. Throughout the afternoon, old messages were reread. Not to reopen wounds. To understand how differently they looked through wiser eyes. How many misunderstandings had been created by assumptions? How many opportunities disappeared because both people expected the other to speak first? The answer was impossible to know. But one thing became obvious. Silence had written chapters that honesty could have rewritten. As evening approached again, the sky looked almost identical to yesterday. Yet the person looking at it was completely different. Yesterday, every sunset felt like another ending. Today's sunset looked like possibility. Isn't it remarkable how perspective changes everything? The world outside remained the same. Only the heart had changed. And sometimes, That is enough to transform an entire future. Standing near the window, one final realization emerged. No matter what happens next, no matter whether paths cross again or remain forever separate, love should never become a reason to stop living. Real love should inspire growth. It should encourage courage. It should make people kinder than they were yesterday. If it only creates fear, then fear has become louder than love. That balance needed to change. The tears from yesterday had not been wasted. They had watered the seeds of courage. Now those seeds were beginning to grow. The journey was far from over. The biggest conversation had not happened yet. The greatest surprise had not been revealed yet. And the truth waiting just beyond the horizon would challenge everything the character believed about destiny, timing, and second chances. But before that truth could appear, one final choice still had to be made. A choice so unexpected that it would change not only one heart, but two. The night that followed felt unlike any other. There was no dramatic announcement. No mysterious sign in the sky. No voice whispering impossible secrets. Instead, something far more powerful happened. For the first time in years, the character stopped trying to predict every possible outcome. That habit had stolen countless peaceful moments. Every conversation had been analyzed. Every silence had been overthought. Every delayed response had become 1,000 imaginary stories. But tonight, the endless guessing finally came to an end. Because one simple realization changed everything. The future cannot be controlled. But the person you become while walking toward it absolutely can. That truth settled deeply into the heart. It felt lighter. Stronger. More alive. The next morning arrived with an unexpected opportunity. Nothing extraordinary on the surface. Just an ordinary moment that could have easily been ignored. A familiar place. A familiar face. A familiar feeling. Life has an interesting way of testing whether we have truly changed. It rarely gives us brand new situations. Instead, it quietly brings back old ones. The question is never whether the opportunity returns. The question is whether we return as the same person. Standing there, memories rushed back once again. But this time they didn't create fear. They created understanding. The character realized something that had been invisible all along. Every painful chapter had been preparing the heart for this exact moment. Not to repeat the past. To respond differently than before. Imagine learning the same lesson over and over until one day you finally understand it. That is what growth feels like. The lesson doesn't disappear. You simply become wiser than the obstacle. A gentle smile appeared. Not because every problem had vanished. Because confidence had quietly replaced uncertainty. For months, validation had been searched for in another person's actions. Now it came from within. That change is impossible to fake. People notice it without being told. They may not understand why someone suddenly seems calmer. But they feel the difference. Confidence has a language that words cannot imitate. As the afternoon unfolded, another surprising thought entered the mind. What if they were struggling too? That question changed the entire story. Until now, every memory had been viewed from only one perspective. But every story has two hearts, two fears, two misunderstandings, two silent battles. Perhaps while one person was afraid of rejection, the other was equally afraid of losing someone important. Perhaps while one waited for a message, the other waited for a sign. Perhaps both believed the other had stopped caring, when in reality, both were protecting hearts that desperately wanted to be understood. How many relationships have been shaped by assumptions instead of conversations? Far more than most people realize. The character closed their eyes and remembered one particular moment. A simple goodbye. Nothing unusual. No dramatic words. No emotional confession. Just a quiet farewell. Back then, it seemed insignificant. Now it felt like a crossroads. Sometimes the moments that change our lives don't look important until much later. Life rarely announces, "This is the moment you'll remember forever." It simply happens. Then years pass. And suddenly that ordinary afternoon becomes unforgettable. The realization was almost overwhelming. Not because of regret. Because of appreciation. Every chapter had meaning. Even the painful ones. Especially the painful ones. As evening approached, the heart no longer asked, "Will everything work out exactly as I hope?" Instead, a different question appeared. Will I remain true to who I have become, no matter what happens? That question carried real strength. Because outcomes are uncertain. Character is a choice. For the first time, peace no longer depended on another person's decision. It depended on personal honesty. That freedom felt extraordinary. Then something unexpected happened. A notification appeared. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that instantly answered every question. Just a small reminder that life continues moving. Sometimes the biggest turning points begin with the smallest moments. The character didn't rush. Didn't panic. Didn't invent imaginary meanings. Instead, there was patience. Real patience. Not the forced kind. The peaceful kind that comes from trusting the process rather than fearing it. Hours later, another memory surfaced. This one was different. It wasn't about romance. It was about becoming the kind of person worthy of lasting love. Kindness. Integrity. Courage. Forgiveness. These qualities matter long after excitement fades. Anyone can love during easy seasons. Real character appears during uncertain ones. That lesson became impossible to ignore. Looking into the mirror that night, something felt unfamiliar. The reflection looked the same. Yet the eyes looked different. There was less fear. Less desperation. More hope. More quiet confidence. Growth is strange. You rarely notice it while it's happening. Then one day you realize the things that once broke you no longer have the same power. That realization brought another smile. Not tears this time. Just gratitude. Gratitude for surviving difficult seasons. Gratitude for becoming stronger through them. Gratitude for understanding that timing often reveals what rushing could never achieve. And then, just before the day came to an end, one final thought echoed through the silence. If our paths cross again, I won't meet them as the person I used to be. Those words carried incredible weight. Because transformation had already begun. The next chapter would no longer be about chasing answers. It would be about discovering whether two people who had both changed could finally meet without fear. And if that moment ever arrived, neither of them would recognize the version they had once left behind.